Hello. How are you? Can you hear me?
Great, how are you?
All right. How are you? Jesse?
Oh, I didn't realize I was the one being addressed. Sorry.
Oh, well, just in general. I want to make sure everyone could hear me.
How are you?
All right.
That's good.
Welcome to the meeting. So I guess we'll have a couple more people come in the next couple minutes. So first of all, I guess I'd ask people if they had anything they wanted to bring up, if there were any things they needed to talk about. We have the Brains, Minds, and Machines Summer School going on. I see there's a robust discussion on that in the Slack.
Yeah. As far as myself, things to talk about today. I don't have a lot to present, but I may go over. There's been a lot of developments in like the NeuroMatch slow pod stuff, so I'll probably talk about that a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about the brain, mind, machine stuff too, but I might just kind of note some things that came up that I mentioned in Slack or throughout it. Or if anybody else here is went to that course too. But a lot of this week for me has just been putting together, doing the legwork for some of this very study group things that I've been mentioning. So,
okay.
And then there's the poster, which is not really going to be a poster anymore at the BMM. It's just be a presentation, but I mean, that will mostly just be kind of revamping previous stuff. But I'll be working more on that this weekend now that I have time to do it. So, yeah.
Okay. See, Sunidhi is here as well. Hi.
Good morning. Hello, all.
Yeah, hi everyone. I missed last week.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then who else is here? See, someone else came in. Anyways, so we have a couple things on the agenda for today. We have, I'm going to give a NetLogo. Oh, hi, Anson. Kind of figured that was you. So Ash asked me about NetLogo, and Jesse and Anson have mentioned NetLogo, so I'm going to give a NetLogo tutorial. It's not going to be like where I run the program on the computer, because those don't work sometimes very well. I'm going to go through a series of screenshots and kind of go over what's in NetLogo. So we'll go over the MetaBrains task board, and then we'll talk about the NeuroMatch project, that the feedback project, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about the data and about some of the other things. So I don't know if I want to start, like Jesse said he had some things to talk about. Maybe we'll start there.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. I'm not quite sure how to break it down in the sense of, let me see myself. In the sense of, I guess let's break it into two general categories of like, is anybody, I don't know if anybody else in the chat is in the MOT, the Brains, Minds, and Machines Summer School. Okay.
I am, but I've not been attending all the talks and stuff. But I am, yeah.
Okay. Were you, or I know, I think it was, Rishab. I think he's in the Telluride Engineering Conference. I don't think, is anybody else here in that? in that event. There's the Telluride Neuromorphic Cognition Engineering Conference, which I think Rashab and I have kind of been. We went through the first week together. Well, not together, but separately. And the first week was mostly lectures, and the second week of the Telluride conference was some breakout meetings to kind of get into smaller groups. So I think we're both kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, if anything, with that. So that's a cool separate conference. It's very engineering focused though, so it's not really my. I don't have a lot of experience there, but I think it's more Rashad is more of engineering in that sense. So I think he's also joining the lab more formally too, right, Bradley?
Yeah, he's officially a research collaborator, and he's gonna maybe come next week and talk a little bit about what he wants to do.
Yeah, so that's cool. Good to have him do more things with us. Let's see. So that was a bonus comment. Let's see. I'm going to try to show some things. I don't know if it's going to work.
Select tab.
The BMM conference, for anybody who's not in it, it's quite different from. I think I'm just going to do this actually. I'll be able to weird first. The BMM conference. Yes, I know. Was interesting in that. Well, it's originally listed as a summer school, but it really isn't, to be honest. It's been a series of lectures, and I think you can see Slack right now, but I don't quite know. Can you see my Slack screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just the Slack channel where a lot of discussion has been. There's also another Slack that they made. That's one of the things. There really isn't a lot of interactivity in the course right now. Well, there was more so, but originally I think there just wasn't a great transition to online in that. And again, this is kind of compared to Neuromatch Academy, which set the bar just remarkably higher than probably should be expected. But they did, from terms of interaction and virtual accessibility and tech savvy and being a certain way, it was kind of impressive. But the first week, I'm just trying to pick any highlights from the first week. A lot of people were interested and did talk here in the Slack and talked online. But there was kind of this movement because you really don't use the chat in the Zoom. And a lot of the panelists are a little bit, a lot of the speakers want to keep having more conversations elsewhere. So hopefully some of them come into Slack. But outside of those sort of technical nuances, it's been interesting. It's been a good week of there's been really, anytime you get to hear from Thomas Poggio, or these just grandmasters in the field who are based at MIT, it's a great thing. And I've tried to keep some daily counts of things here in the Slack. There's threads on the side, and it kind of works. So you can kind of see things here. My favorite day, and if Cindy has other things to say, feel free to do so. My favorite day has been day 5. But there were some other good things too. But I really enjoyed Josh Tenenbaum's talk, which is a lot of the discussion has kind of been on specific aspects of what feels like computer vision to me, which is a great thing to do. But it was nice to see a little more variation, and Josh just kind of went through. Can I actually just go through this? Oh, this is actually great. This is sort of what I hope for. This is not perfect, but you can kind of see this hopefully. these are some of the slides from Josh's talk. Like, he's going all the way. He basically is. He did in his talk a little bit of what I've been doing. Like, he gave some history about how, back in the day, like Turing, when he posted his 1950 paper about computing machinery and intelligence, at that point, the idea was blank slate. And a lot of his work since then, since then has kind of been, we don't believe in that view as much anymore. And now there's a lot of people. I think most of these people are at MIT. Doesn't say their name. I know the one on the right is Laura Schultz, who did speak later in the panel that day. But it was just interesting to see him kind of trace that a little bit of the history and continue to bring all these things about, visionless inverse graphics. Intuitive psychology was a really interesting concept that he brought up and what he's trying to model cognitively. And he had some really interesting examples of that. Joint inference in beliefs or desires, like that's something he didn't get to talk about this very much at all, but I was really interested in that. And some of these things really heavily alluded to stuff that we might be doing minute brain stuff or like I think Josh, more than most other speakers at the panel, most of the speakers, with exception to the panel today, I should say, I really liked he brought to the table a lot of interest in learning and creating these generative models. Like, if you don't know anything about Josh Tenenbaum, a lot of his work is, he describes his work on, like, how do we understand that, a small child can learn so much so quickly with so little inputs, in the way that, in a sense, that he's exploring a very generative view of how this happens. And he's very interested in, like, if people are familiar with, like, Jean Piaget, I think they say Piaget, the French, he's like a child psychologist who studied a lot of learning and development. But that's interesting because it's not really the most popular topic in a lot of learning and computation and learning and cognitive science in that sort of developmental sense aren't necessarily mainstream. And as going back to the Turing paper, like, they weren't necessarily. It's kind of a particular approach to cognitive things, and particularly machine learning, in that sense now, which is a bit ironic, but yeah. Anyway, like one of the things, the origin of common sense in babies. This is one of another thing he mentioned. Where's learning from picture? Okay, so yes, I was a Josh Tenenbaum fanboy for that day. And then this one here, Nancy Conwisher gave a really interesting talk as well, which I think has a lot of implications for some of neuromatch stuff, some things that Anson's been interested in, and different ways. I won't go as in-depthly into this talk, but I really like the way she went through her. I really like how Nancy went through her different slides and discussed. She was very good about discussing the philosophy behind her inquiries, and I think that's a really interesting skill that I'm noticing more, even after NeuroMatch. So yeah, that was very good. So yeah, that's like a really a snapshot look into the brains, machines things. Did you want to mention anything about it in your experiences, Sunidhi?
Honestly, I've not been through a lot of talks. I've been preoccupied since a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I think I did go through that day 5 talk, like one of those talks. And yeah, it was like, I just quickly went through it. So yeah, I'm not really a regular to this.
That's okay. The thing is, like,
so I did honestly like try to be a regular, but then it's not that interactive as such, like NeuroMatch was. So it was like, it was, difficult coming back and like that. So it's not like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like, it's a cool thing that's happening, but it's it's a little bit different. But in a lot of sense, for people who are interested, a lot of the recordings are basically just being posted here, and their experience isn't that much different. You'll be able to ask questions, but it's very similar to the experience that we're doing here. It's kind of like everybody's in the observer track, if you will, from NeuroMatch Academy. But I mean, there's still, like, I really liked the panel discussions from this week were really great. So I recommend the panels, and then obviously I like day 5, but you can look at everything. I believe my screen is still being showed here. But just look at this website, MIT Summer School, and you can see all the resources and the slides. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. Where's the other thing? Any other questions or comments about that before I just mention NeuroMax pod stuff? Okay. So just quickly, I'll say this too. A number of people have reached out to me after I said I'm probably going to host one. But for NeuroMatch Academy, there's kind of a grassroots movement to have people host their own pods and go through NeuroMatch materials again. I'm probably going to do that. I've been doing a lot of kind of just the grunt work of trying to figure out how to do that in my spare time this week, and I made this very simple doc, and some people have signed up or expressed interest in here. You can edit this as needed. I'll put this link in. Actually, I'll put it in. Just see if I can do that. Maybe I can't do that. Well, I'll do that after I stop sharing my screen. Whoop, there we go. Yeah, sorry. After I stop sharing my screen. But yeah. Basically, I'm going to do mine, and I'm going to combine mine. If you can see over here, I'm going to combine mine with my cognition study group, at least a little bit. I don't know if people are really going to care that much to do it or not, but I'm basically going to try to go through a week, one day per week. There's also, I can show you guys this too. There's also this, which kind of has been I don't really know what to make of this, but it's Click Up, and one of the, I forgot his name, Zoe, I think, organized this. So there's a bunch of items here in Click Up, and you can just email me or him or the Telegram group, and you get here, but I don't really know.
I did go through it, but I've not explored it yet. Did you?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I am, because I looked at stuff and like I see different things happening, but I don't really see a lot of discussion. Like, I just made my own group here because I know I'm going to do it, and I said this, which is also in the Google document that I made. Yeah, Zora.
This slow potting, I was waiting to hear from the person who posted it in the Twitter. I didn't know they are actually kind of started off.
Oh yeah. You mean like that one Twitter post by that person?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's like no real coordination of this. It's very unofficial. But I can get you into this thing, which isn't also really official, but it's someone that puts some work together for it, and I think it's kind of solid to have different discussions about topics, which is good, but I think there's quite a bit of work to do like, there's no real structure in it right now, honestly, and there's no one who's like sorting. There will be no sorting of pods, there's no sorting hat, although if you want to do Harry Potter sorting hat, maybe. But like, there's no actual. It's basically. I think people don't understand. And as much as I've been trying to follow this as to what's happening, it's that Twitter post where there was someone posted a tweet, and in it there was like a sign-up sheet, and then a form, a sign-up form, and then a sheet with a response to it, and that was helpful for sort of organizing things. But there, as far as I know, frankly, and I'm not trying to sound really cool, but I think I'm the only person who said, yes, I'm hosting a pod, here's what I'm going to do about it. Like, I think people have said they'd like to, or like to join stuff, but I don't see anybody else doing it. So I'm just trying to create structure where there exists none, and hopefully that's also happening. If people see other examples or know other pods, maybe we could throw them in this next to mine or talk about them, because there's no like I have a very specific time when it was in mine, and I know very few people are going to be able to do it. Like, I'm looking to do weekday evenings because that's the best time for me. Obviously, Saturday mornings I have some other lines to take care of, but it's like, you know, I don't really know what to say about that too much, but I'm kind of trying to create structure where there is none. So this is more about it here, which you may have already seen. It's been nice to have people show interest. Some reached out from the forum, some have put down here. Like Bobby talked about being interested. Excuse me. Just other people who some
Yeah, even I did, but I think at that time you did mention the time. I guess it was like 8 week or something. I did reach out to you, but I saw it 6 to 9 p.m. and it's not fitting. So it will be like 3:30 to 6:30 a.m. here.
Right, exactly.
I was thinking of maybe like having another group or something, but yeah, I haven't thought it yet.
Right.
Probably that's something.
What I was considering doing, and it depends, like, what really sucks is that because there's so little infrastructure right now, I'm actually was going to put this here anyway. Because there's so little structure right now, it's hard to really determine a lot of things. What I may do is just do my original idea was to meet 1 or 2 times a week, and what I might do is just do a short time during the weekend nights and another time on the weekends, just to go over stuff if people want to do it, especially if they're in India or other time zones that aren't. You know, weekday nights on the East Coast are not. They're pretty much only good for people who had like the United States time zones, or especially the West Coast. Not really going the other direction around the world. So I get that, and that will depend somewhat on demand and what can work. But that's why I feel like I kind of want to encourage other people who want to do this to say, hey. Don't wait and make your own pod. And as far as I know, what that really is just get a group of people who you want to have a discussion with regularly. That's it. There's not going to be a lot of structure provided for this. It's all unofficial. I reached out to my TA and to Megan Peters and to Bradly Alicea, who is this. Thank you, Bradley, for your support towards this and offering us a place to talk about this in the lab. And potentially helping out with it in the future, but like that's still, it's like I have some support around me, but it's sort of like it's a bit Wild West right now. So I encourage people to do that. And if you have any questions, like even if you don't want to join, if you're not going to do my pod, if you're interested in talking about it, just let me know, because I'm interested in trying to facilitate the logistics work behind it, and I know basically there's. I know Zora, I think that's how you say it. I know he's doing stuff for it to try to give it space, but it's still going to be what? I don't know. It's still going to be up to people to find their groups and just that. So. Last thing I'll say quickly, and turn the rest over to Bradley. I'm still actually very interested in my cognition study group. and I'm actually interested in, I may be using this application, this Lab Exchange. I'm trying to figure it out because I don't want to have an app zoo, and a lot of the material I'm just going to be putting is going to be like, Word documents or whatever. But a vision that I have a little bit is I would like to create some real resource materials that flesh out what you see here about the history, about trends. Like, there's some really interesting stuff that's to be explored in all of this. And I think, I don't know if I can have it here or not. Well, there's also a blog post that I'm writing, but there's not much to say about that yet. But like even things that are coming up, like this is a really interesting. This is actually Reinforcement Learning Introduction by Richard Sutton and Bartow. And this is you can find a draft version online, but just you hear it come up. For a brief tangent, like you hear these things come up in the conferences. You hear these sort of allusions to the trend lines of development of things, and I'm very interested in like machine learning in this sense, like this historical sense of it, because I'm interested in learning relevant techniques and skills like everybody is here, but also I feel like there's such a poor understanding and communication about like this. The preface here for the first edition of that book, they're talking about, like, this is a really important thing I think to understand. There is very little original focus on reinforcement learning because people just didn't really do it when it first came out in the 80s, I guess, or whatever. And I would defer to Bradley about that because he know more about that than I, but I feel like I don't know. I'm not just someone who likes lore and backstory about a comic book or a movie universe, but I feel like this is really important to understand where the trajectories of these fields related to machine learning, cognitive science are going, and that's kind of the main thrust behind. I want to do other things in the study group, but like that was a lot of the inception behind my NeuroMatch project itself, and now formalizing it into materials that are leading into, like, I'm going to be writing some blog posts or even some papers eventually about this, but also just like an actual set of coursework. I feel like I've been looking for things like that out there already, but there's like Coursera courses and that, but it's been it's something to do. So, did you want to say something, Bradley?
You're done? I mean, I was going to ask them some questions and things like that.
Okay. That's pretty much all of like my really random updates. Sorry, this wasn't the most. This wasn't a clear set of slides about things, but just to kind of give broad updates on things related to this. That's kind of what I've been up to, and after. One other thing, I may not be available next weekend, but what I'm kind of trying to do is set something up for NeuroMatch, because there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of, I just know it's a situation where there's a lot of people looking for structure and there is none, so I'm trying to facilitate that, and people are interested in trying to facilitate that. Again, please reach out to me, or if you want to get into this app, even though there's not really anything other than there's nothing over here yet, but you can maybe add stuff there to it. I'm very interested in making NeuroMatch LPOS happen, and I feel like maybe if there's enough people who kind of want to administratively say, let's have a place to do it, or like an organizer facilitation version of it, I'm really interested in that, because I feel like there's a great opportunity and a great need, but I know also that, like, it's going to have to kind of happen on our own, and it's going to have to happen in the next 2 weeks, because when people start going back to school, a lot of people won't really care anymore, and that's fine. But just like, I actually do want to do stuff with this, because I'm not going to go back to school, so this is my
Yeah, so I was thinking of maybe like putting up another, that group that you've made for a slow pod, but that won't be possible maybe till like 1st of September, because I have a deadline for a paper. And I was actually thinking that in the next meeting I'll probably present finally something on that aging thing we discussed on that PPT that Bradley said. So maybe nothing till next weekend, but yeah, after that I am very interested in making this happen. Like I anyway have to go through anime stuff again, so it'll be like better there are a couple of more people to actually drive all this through. I will be doing it, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to start before September. But yeah, I will be doing it for sure.
Okay, and I feel like just to kind of directly comment on that, and I'll stop. Should I just do this here? How do I stop? Did that work? Oh yeah. Just to be like, just to comment on that, I sent this this Word document, and there's this ClickUp thing. I think in a lot of ways, it's just going to come down to people saying, hey, do you want to meet up at a certain time a week and go over stuff? I think that's what it's really going to come down to, because there's not. It's going to, I'm trying to create structure. I don't know how much of it's going to actually be sustainable. So at the very least, I would say, if you want to meet, probably best time for me would be on the weekends. If you want to meet on the weekends to go over stuff in the future, let me know, because I'm probably going to be up for it, and I'm going to be going through it myself. And if that works for other people too, that's great.
Yeah. So I think mine is going to work on weekends only. Like weekdays might not be, and anyway, like weekdays for you, like the time won't match at all. So even if I'm free on weekdays, it won't. But yeah, on weekends I'll be going through stuff. Maybe next week onwards. So maybe like we can and go about it.
Yeah, and like I don't know if half the people that, like, there were a couple people who really were interested and were like, yes, I'm in your time zone and want to do it. So like, I don't know. I don't have no idea who's going to be available, but it's going to come down to people who actually want to do it, and then making it work out.
Yeah. Even like a couple of students in my pod were like, I will do it and all, but it's going to just boil down to who really wants to do it. So even during anime, there were people who dropped out, right? So even when things were official. So now that things are unofficial, that I don't think everybody will be like continuing till the end. But yeah, I am interested. So let's try to make things work on weekends.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Thank you for that. And good.
I just thought like people are trying to work on it, but then I didn't get any updates as such. I was trying to communicate with people, but I thought that the updates just got stopped. Like after the anime, I had some of my academic stuff to do, and then I kind of lost track. I didn't know that these things are going, but I really want to work on this the thing which we did as project during anime, and as well as the NetLogo one too. I thought I lost track in between. Like I lost updates.
Yeah. As far as the actual project, and I don't know if Bradley was going to say that specifically, the feedback project, like, that's still game. Like, that was, I guess I didn't comment on that here, but, like, I'm so interested in that, and I think that ties into, actually a really good manifestation of, like, the meta brain stuff that we're doing. So that's still something that I'm interested in doing 100%. I don't know if Bradley has more to say about that or not.
Yeah, so if I just comment on that, Aksh, so I know the Telegram group that they've made, there are people like interacting in that Telegram group. So that's why I got to know about this pickup thing and all the organization and stuff. So maybe I'll just like send a link or something for that, and then you can join it.
Yeah,
sure.
there's I was kind of maybe expecting a little bit of something from the actual NeuroMatch, like legitimate NeuroMatch Academy organizers, to either comment on this or offer a little bit. Have you guys? I've received my Podmates, like regular NeuroMatch Academy talk. I received my matches and I received my completion certificate. Have you guys heard anything else beyond that in terms of like there was all these like different projects and ideas and stuff to work on, but I haven't received any other email about like post NeuroMatch stuff.
Yeah, so after that, I think we received 2 mails for like one was your, I don't know, one was in your area kind of interests people, and then the other one was like in general. So there were 2 mails in which they recommended, matches, like you can talk to these people about stuff. Yeah, those 2 mails and then just the final certificate. Yeah, nothing else.
Okay. I only got 1 mail about matches. I guess you're cooler than me. But I think I'm sure Bradley had other stuff to talk about today. But if you have any questions about NeuroMatch at all, please use Slack or DM me anywhere. I'm still interested in the project for sure. Like I just have not focused on that this week. I've been trying to set up this infrastructure for other stuff, and but I think there's a lot to do regarding. There's a lot of leads that have just come up also from the BMM stuff about even agent-based modeling and ways to refine a lot of the aims of the lab in terms of the metabrain developmental aspect of things. So, yeah, I think that's probably plenty on my end. So I'll turn it over to Bradley.
Well, thank you for that, Jesse. Yeah, thank you for that, Jesse. That was very good. I had a couple questions about what you had there. So first of all, this is something that you said that you wanted to sort of use the NMA materials, sort of this slow version of it. You remember that we have this deworm ML stuff that we did last fall. I know you were there, so you remember that. Is there any way maybe we can bring those things together and kind of like use this as sort of a curriculum building thing? I mean, I know that like it's sort of NeuroMatch based, but to have that as sort of a way for people to engage with things.
Yeah, I didn't know. I haven't really. I mentioned things to you, but I didn't know how much you'd be interested in merging things or combining things, or like how much you wanted to like. I don't want to steer the lab too much towards NeuroMatch related stuff, or like or Devo Worm, which may fit more better in some ways. So I'm totally open to whatever you think would be a good like. If you basically just heard all the stuff that I said about what I'm trying to do, so whatever your advice is, or however you see a good way to combine efforts, I'd be happy to listen to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that like this is great, and I think that you said like we should do it in the next 2 weeks. I think actually people would be more interested in it during the school year because I think the NeuroMatch stuff will serve as a good resource for people if they want to. Say like learn if they go back to school and they're learning about things and they want to know about some topic that they don't get covered in their course, then this is like the perfect opportunity for them to go and get like some sort of tutorial on it. And because that's what a lot of people do with a lot of the educational materials, like the short courses on like the Stanford course on machine learning, for example. A lot of people use that as like a supplement to their education. Yeah. And so but in our case, I think I like the fact that you were able to organize it into a doc, and then it looks like you used ClickUp. What is ClickUp?
Yeah, ClickUp is something that I've never really heard before. I'll try to share this again. Oh, someone leave a chat. Oh, okay. There's a chat for us in the thing. Oh. I can also add anybody to the Telegram group afterwards, but I think Cindy's going to do it, so thank you for that. Okay. Just to share this again, yeah, I'm going to share my whole screen. ClickUp is, from what I understand, and this is something that Zora made. Not the app, but he was. It's sort of like a big project management thing.
I can see a screen somehow.
Oh yeah, it's dark.
Yeah, it's blank. I can see it.
Weird.
Can you share it as like a tab or full screen?
Well, let's try that again. I don't know if it's going to be any better. Can you see this? It's just a ClickUp app again. And,
yeah. That's okay.
I don't really know what to make of it, honestly. I don't know if this is like its actual. Because these are, from what I can tell, these are actually tasks, and this isn't a task. This is a group of the data sets here, which are, I think he put them together. They kind of copy and pasted it looks like he copied them from the books or whatever, which is helpful. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I don't really know what it is or what to do with it, and I haven't necessarily found. I'm kind of just there because a lot of people are there, and I'm just sort of waving this banner here.
Yeah.
And even this was outside of my study group, which was an existing thing, which, you can't see because I'm not on that page now. Outside of I went back to the doc, but in the doc that I made, I basically put the NeuroMatch sign up on top of the doc that I had for the study group, and those are all very temporary things. Like this is just because there was a lot of outreach and what's going on, and so a lot of this week is just trying to provide a very initial structure to things that will immediately be refined this weekend and beyond. So we're definitely. I think the more different people can latch onto pre-existing structures, the more anything is going to happen. So yeah.
So I think that's good. Could you provide a link to the doc both in the chat here and then on Slack in one of the channels?
I can do that now. That's in this chat, and I'll put it in Slack next.
Yeah. So were you thinking of inviting people into Slack, or did you think?
Well, potentially, in the sense of, I don't know who. A lot of the people that have reached out are essentially already here, or here as it is. So,
okay.
if there's a substantial amount of people who also want to join, I don't know who's going to really. I don't know who's going to show up and who's going to actually participate in anything.
Okay.
At the very least, it could just be the people who are here actually today, right now, and maybe one or two people like Bobby might show up a couple times, which that's fine. I'm just in the situation of if I've gotten to a place where it's I want to go through the material, I want to create resources. If people want to come with me, I welcome them to do so. But I don't think there's a lot of structure elsewhere, so I'm just trying to make it however best can.
Yeah.
If you're okay with it, I would invite people to Slack, but I don't know how many more people that would be anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be quite the same as I want to do NeuroMatch, I want to do MIT BMM Summers course. That's a big, easy, fun thing to do, and I want to do that. This is more do you want to do a specific thing? So.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I think definitely. If people are interested, they can join the Slack. Just let me know. I mean, I'm the one who can invite people, but also, we'll try to build some structure, within the lab on this too. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think your document's a good start, and then we can talk maybe more in coming weeks about, how to integrate that with some of the things that we already have. So I mean, that's
I wasn't, depending on how much, that could be a whole discussion if you want to go there. I know you mentioned openness to it, but I'm interested in I think there will be enough demand and enough resource. Like, there's stuff to do here, and it's a fun thing to do, and it will benefit a lot of people if it happens. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that again. So if anyone has any other comments about it, just we can talk about it in Slack or maybe next week. So yeah, it's definitely something to follow up on. Now let me share my screen. I want to do this. Let me try my entire screen and share my tabs. So, okay. Can you see my screen? Can you see my drive here? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So let's see. I have a bunch of stuff in here. I just don't know where everything is. So I was gonna talk first about the project, the IBL mouse project. And so we're going to talk about the variables a little bit. I'm not going to talk about too much this week, but let's try to ease ourselves back into it. So this is something that I posted in, I took this from, I think, one of the notebooks or something on the different variables in the IBL dataset. And it's interesting, there are a lot of variables listed here. But as I'll talk about in a minute, that's not exactly what you get out as output. So there are all these like variables that they list, and so what the IBL data set is this data set where they had a bunch of labs, they did the same protocol, and they collected data, and then they combined the data together. So the idea was they wanted to create this data set that was highly reproducible across labs, that had the same task and the same measures, and then you would have this huge data set that was shareable with other people. So that's the idea behind it. And the mouse does this really complicated selection task on a visual pattern. And so there's all this stuff going on in the data set. So that's why we have all these variables here. So we have, it's actually, I don't know if they're variables or they're like tabs here where they kind of define things that are going on. So, for example, IBL trials.go queue times, time of go queues in choice world, in absolute seconds from session start, rather than relative to trial onset. Note, this is the time the sound is actually played. So I don't know if this is something you can extract from the data set or what, but these are all things that if we're interested in this, like what the description is, we can definitely get the data. And so the idea here for the feedback project is that we want to find variables or measures that reflect maybe we want to build a model of what's going on in the mouse's brain. And so to do that, we need to have like things relating to one another. Not necessarily causally, but like in ways that measure things that we of interest to us. So, for example, let me find another one. So repetition number of the trial. That's kind of like sort of sorting information if you want that. But there are other. Actually, I don't know if this would be any good. The response time they give a definition of the response time, which is time in absolute seconds from session start when a response was recorded. So that gives you like a definition of like a response time. If you see that in the variables, you know kind of what that represents in the world. And so the idea is that we want to have like these well-defined variables, and we want to relate the variables. And this would be true even in any project you do, any sort of experimental project. You want to have a good handle on what the definitions are for the variables, because sometimes it's very important to know like what the exact definition is, so that you can put things in relation to one another. So I have this variables. I'm going to put this up on GitHub in the feedback project repo. I'm going to create a new file today, and I'm going to like put some of these things in there and highlight them for people so that they can get us, so that they can, this is like a quick reference so they can think about what this is. So there are a lot of different variable definitions here. And they kind of refer to all the things that are going on in these experiments. But then if we go back to the process data. So Ashk and I were working on this notebook that they give us, and you run the notebook, and at the end of the notebook, it generates a file, and it's IBL mouse data processed. And this is just like, I just wanted to summarize it here in this spreadsheet just to show what it gives you. So the notebook generates a file. You can go in on the left-hand side of the notebook. There's a folder. You click on the folder icon. You can go into the, I can't remember what subfolder it is, but there's some CSV files in there. And one of the CSV files is IBL mouse data processed. And so if you download that, you can open that up, and you can look at these, or you can open it up in the notebook as well. And you see all these different variables. So it actually gives you A through J variables. I'm not sure why they don't necessarily match those descriptions that were shown in the this file, but you get these like probability left is this one here, so we can match that. But some of these aren't really very well matched. I think that what they do is they maybe combine some of those into these variables. But this is what you're going to get as output. This is like a set of summary statistics. There's another file that it generates as well, and I haven't explored that file, and that might actually give you the full set of variables. But those are the more raw data. So these are the data that we have at the end that's processed. You have contrast left, contrast right, choice, which is a binary. It's either they choose it or not. Feedback type, which is 0 or 1. And I think it's just that there's like a presence or absence of feedback. There's this probability left, which is this thing at the end, which is probability that the stimulus will be on the left-hand side for the current block. The probability of the right is 1 minus this. So they only need to give you the left, and then you can calculate the right from that probability. I just gave a couple of examples here where it's 1. So probability right would be 0 in this case. But I think the probability left is 0.06. The probability right would be 0.04. So we can create that variable from this. And so, like, that's basically how it's set up. There's session and answer. I think answer relates to choice, but I'm not sure. It might be in here. So this is the key. I'm going to extract the ones that match with that table, and I'm going to kind of put them in there directly so people can see them. And then that's what we have to work with. And then from there, you can test different ideas about what's going on in the data. You can take a variable and relate it to another variable. You can say, this variable and this variable, this variable has an effect on this variable, which is like a feed-forward connection. And then there's some feedback, which might be a fraction of the relationship between the two variables. And I've done some modeling of like feedback loops in the past. So maybe what I'll do is I'll share some of that and I'll bring some of that into the project as well. And I'll maybe create something on GitHub for that, and maybe we'll talk about that next week. I'm just trying to ease us through this sort of analysis to try to get some headway on it. But I think that's basically what we have in terms of the data. I wanted to show the data, what it looks like to people so that they have an idea. I was going to go over the MetaBrain tasks, and I might do that really quickly. So can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the MetaBrain. This is the MetaBrain task board, and we haven't looked at this in a couple months, I think, because we got sort of once NeuroMatch started, it's kind of got subsumed. But it looks like Jesse's been putting things on here regularly. So we have a bunch of things here that are completed. I did some presentations on Bayesianism and belief modeling, affordances. We talked a little bit about that. I don't remember what that was. Of course, the Devo NN presentation, which was Jesse's going to be drawing from that for his presentation. And then the manager description, which is something Jesse and I talked about. So these aren't always in the MetaBrain category, but they're related. So we have some things in progress. The tutorial on agent-based models, which I'm going to do today, so I'll put that in completed. Blog post and review of A-Life 2020. I think that's something that I'll be doing. But I did want to point out that currently on Twitter, and if you follow my Twitter feed, you'll see some of it, is that A-Life 2020 is presenting papers on Twitter. They're just kind of posting papers that were in the conference. And then the authors may or may not be giving some discussion on it in the thread. So they're going to feature, several papers a day from now until the end of the month. And so that'll be something to look out for. Anson is interested in doing this Principia Qualia presentation. That's something that I haven't heard much about in the recent past, but I don't know, Anson, if you have anything to say about that, or...
It still interests me, but I'm definitely I was more focused on neuromath the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm currently prepping for the fall semester, but it is still something that interests me.
Okay. We can put it on hold. And
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for that. Let's see. Talk about Complexity Weekend Hackathon. That seems like a long time ago, but it was a long...
I think that can be in the complete section for the time being, because I think that's come up actually a lot indirectly in many of the things that I talked about between now and then, but I don't have any more to say about that. So,
okay. What about the lab presentation on affordances?
That's still in play, but that will kind of come up again once I get more of the other infrastructure of the other materials I'm working out.
Okay.
So the same thing for direct perception too. Like those are things I would talk about, but not right now. And also the blog posts. Yeah. Those are actually in the works. Those are all in the works. So maybe those are in progress now, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Put that there. Finish ABM coursework. So that was something that...
Still on hold.
Yeah. So then there's... Jesse mentioned the MIT BMM video from Josh Tenenbaum, which is probably going to be out after the summer school. So we'll keep that in maybe hold. And that's from what I saw from what you posted in Slack, it looks like there's a lot of relevant things in there. So
yeah, at some point, and maybe in the future, I think we really need to maybe just go through that video, or maybe I'll just pick some highlights from it to talk about, because at length, like I kind of did a brief overview today, but there are quite a few things that touched upon, because there's like, I don't know if you posted recently about, I think you mentioned a paper in one of the cognitive something channels, or one of the channels in Slack, but like even the things about, I don't know if it was Josh's or another talk or the panel today, but like the virtual reality related aspect of things. And as a side note, actually, I remember this now. I will be continuing to further. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll put that in this a task for this. But making a Notion database of the specific projects, so that they're what's currently active in the lab. In one table, I think would be useful outside of the events and other tracking that we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. We can put that on later.
Yeah, I'll do that later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I did if you check the YouTube channel, there's a video that I made this week, and I put a link in Slack on some of the reflections about NeuroMatch and this time period. And so two of the things I mentioned here are this discussion on allostasis machines. So this might actually interest Anson. This is something that if you go to the video, you'll learn more about. It's this idea of the brain being sort of a maintainer. It maintains allostasis, and allostasis is important for a lot of functions. People have talked a lot about it in terms of health and in terms of physiology, but maybe cognition as well. And then another thing that comes up in that video is a comparison of what we were terming Gibsonian information in the I think in the information theory talk, and Shannon information. And so I kind of give some more reflections on that. So those are things that definitely, if you look at that video, you can learn more about. And I just kind of pontificate about it, but maybe we can follow up on that. Then there's agent-based modeling in NetLogo, which is something that
if you've done all those things, you maybe can put them in complete. Like if you're going to talk about agent-based modeling in NetLogo today, all those other things that you mentioned. I mean, yeah.
So, and then the autocurriculum and emergence of innovation. That was a paper that we haven't had a chance to review. Jesse said he was interested in presenting on it, but that's something actually back from ICLR, I believe.
Yes, and I still want to do it, but I think it'd be better to do it after some other things.
Yeah.
I don't remember that one.
This one.
I know I've been there, but yeah. Can you click on that actually and see if I put something
Number
in there?
7.
Okay. All right. I'll look at that later, but that can be helpful, I guess, for this time being too.
Yeah, that's good. So I think I just wanted to go back and revisit the thing and see where we were. I think we have a lot of things to sort of follow up on, but again, like I said, with tasks, sometimes they're irrelevant after a while. Sometimes you want to break them up. So it's not. This is just a reflection of the state of what we had been talking about, so that's fine. If you have any ideas about what you want to add or talk about changing or anything, if you can access this board, do so. If not, let me know and I'll make the change for you.
Did Sunidhi have a specific thing that you mentioned? I know you mentioned wanting to present something, but if there's a specific...
regarding that aging PPT that Bradley gave me that week, so I just go through it and then maybe present a couple of papers on aging and maybe try to draft a project around it.
Okay.
I think it's fixed there, but yeah, maybe I'll update you guys on Slack in the next week, before the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing's fixed yet, yeah.
So I'll just put it as an open issue and then we'll update. Okay. All right, so that's good. So finally, I want to get to the NetLogo tutorial. It's already 10 o'clock, or at the top of the hour. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So this is we talked about NetLogo in the agent-based modeling session, I think last week. And now I'm going to give a tutorial on it. So I mentioned NetLogo kind of in passing, and I didn't describe what it was. But this is what it is. So this is a platform that you can download from the web for free. It has a library of resources, but you can also modify them or write your own simulations. And so this is a good platform because it's fairly easy to use. It's high-level programming, and it actually allows you to build simulations that are even higher level. In other words, you can write the code, which is basically in Java, which might be a little hard for some of you, but we can work on it. But then you can create a simulation where you have things like sliders and other things that you can modify as you go along. Okay. So, and other people can use them maybe more effectively. They don't have to keep changing the code. they can just use the sliders. And so I didn't mention, I put this in the slides after the talk last time, but this is sort of the inspiration for NetLogo. This is the book Turtles, Termites, and Traffic Jams, and it's by Mitchell Resnick. I think he's at MIT. And he created this programming language called StarLogo, and this was like back in the 90s or even earlier. And the idea was to create these agents that interacted, but to do so at sort of a high level of programming. So in other words, it's like programming in this sort of visual, this graphical user interface type thing, where you have, you press a button, you can see the thing, you can see the agent-based simulation execute. You can change the parameters and you can explore it in that way. And so he uses these agents, he calls them turtles. And the turtles, termites, and traffic jams refers to, the termites and traffic jams parts refers to what we talked about in some previous talks, where termites and traffic jams exhibit these properties that are emergent. And so the idea is if you can set up a simulation with, say, a flow of turtles in traffic, you create a traffic lane of turtles, and you increase the density of the turtles in those traffic lanes, you can create a traffic jam. Traffic jams are known to be like controlled by this, tuning this parameter, and once you exceed a certain value of that parameter, there's a jam and a spontaneous jamming of traffic. And so you can explore things like that, which aren't necessarily intuitive. They're quite subtle. So, and this was transferred over to NetLogo as a sort of a second generation of that. So the world is, this is basically what the world is. You have a patch, which is a grid cell here. So it's in this grid, it's a single cell. You have turtles that are moving agents, which move between these patches. And then you have a link between the turtles. So the idea is these turtles, which are the smiley faces, they can occupy any grid at any time. So they move to different grids over time, but they only occupy one grid at a time. Then each turtle is interacting with one another. So if there's a turtle in this grid and there's a turtle in this grid cell, they're neighbors and they interact in a certain way. But if there's a turtle in this cell and a turtle in this cell, they're further apart. They still interact, but that's a consequence of their distance. So that they exhibit different behaviors. But they're always linked as they move around. And then finally you have the observer. And so this is why the GUI is important, the graphical user interface is important, because the observer is the one who determines what the state of the simulation is. The observer is the one who turns the dials and wants to see if the simulation will change in a way that they maybe predict, or just to see what happens. And so this world, there are three ways you can set up this kind of world in terms of the grid. So the first one is the lattice. And if you recall from the agent-based modeling talk that I gave, the cellular automata is like the hallmark of this lattice approach. And we did focus, I think, almost very heavily on the CA, on the lattice approach. And I kind of described what that was, but there are other types of models as well for establishing these grids, these reference grids. So another version of this is the cellular POTS model. And this depicts cells as a cluster of grid points that share the same identifier. Movement and interactions are determined by minimizing the free energy of applied forces. So this is like looking at the physics of the interactions and movement, kind of like the crowd dynamics work. So the crowd dynamics work, I don't know if they use a cellular POTS model underneath, but the physics are more important than, say, like the state of the neighbor. So, but it's similar to the lattice approach in that it has a similar set of outcomes. There's also the lattice-free approach, which is where you don't use square cells or you don't use a grid. You use spheres or centroids with set radii. So in this case, you have a cell and they have a radius, and that radius determines its sphere of influence, maybe even like who it interacts with its neighbors, because their radius might intersect with their radius. this is used often in collision detection algorithms. So this is something that they use if you've seen the simulation voids or a lot of the flocking simulations. I think I showed one in the agent-based modeling talk where you have these agents and they have their own sort of autonomous set of rules, and they have to basically provide themselves with a certain radius of clearance from their neighbors. And so if you do this in parallel, you end up with a bunch of agents that are moving in the same direction. But then, if you steer the group of agents, you can create things like flocks, because all of the agents will follow the leader, but they'll also try to maintain their distance from one another and do some other sort of local control things. And you end up with these really exquisite flocks that move around and have a lot of really interesting dynamics. But it's all based on this sort of simple model of autonomy by the single agent. And so this paper, Agent-Based Modeling of Morphogenetic Systems, is, and I'll make these slides available afterwards, kind of describes all of these different approaches. So back to NetLogo, there's a skeleton of these models. So every model has a certain structure to it. In most NetLogo models, there are two basic procedures that are run by the observer, and that's to set up and to go. The procedure to set up is to run just once at the beginning of the simulation. So it initializes the simulation. You have to do some other things too in terms of the code. And then procedure to go contains all the actions that will be executed repeatedly in this model. Some of these actions will be executed directly by the observer, like playing with sliders and things like that, while others will be run by the agents or the turtles or the patches or the links. So these are things within the simulation. In any case, the procedure to go is run by the observer. So the idea is that you have a program. The first part of the program is the setup. The second part, which is bigger, is the to go section. And the to go section can take inputs from the observer, or it can run things autonomously like a loop. So, it updates itself at a certain, every time step. It'll update like interactions and how those time steps change the state of the system. So it's a very, that's basically the logic of it. So it's pretty straightforward, but then the language itself is a little bit different from anything else you may have programmed. This is an example of the code. So this is a simulation called Daisy World, and this is one of the programs that they have in the in NetLogo library. And so you can see that they have these global variables, these breed variables, patches, daisies. These all sort of are definitions on the top here of the different variables and their possible states. So this kind of max age describes what that is. Global temperature describes the average temperature of the patches in the world. And then, there are other different variables here that they define. And then you have the setup procedures. So to set up, this gives you how the initial condition, and then I didn't include the rest of the program, but then the rest of the program is the to-go part, where all of these variables are defined in the simulation and then run. So the models library, if you go into NetLogo and you install it, you get this screen here, which has this slider and this blank box. And you go into the sort of this file drop down and you go to models library. And that gives you this, which is a models library, which includes just a large number of models, everything from art to biology to computer science to games, which are actually video games that they've ported to this platform, to psychology, to social science, and then curricular models, which are teaching models, which are sort of demonstrating concepts, which are a little bit different than these, because these are for like actual simulation. If you want to collect data, you can use these models. The curricular models are more for teaching, And then there's this IABM textbook, which is a textbook that was written on agent-based models, and they have examples from that textbook. And of course, you can even add your own model, and we'll see that at the end of the tutorial. But you select one of these models, and it's as easy as going into one of these subfolders and just double-clicking on the model when it comes up. So I didn't give you a subdirectory, but the subdirectory will have a huge number of models, and you find one you like. So this one is ethnocentrism. This, I think, is in the social science category, ethnocentrism. And there was a paper on this originally by Mark Granovetter, who's a sociologist, and he wrote a paper on threshold models of collective behavior. This was back in 1978. And he describes this threshold model as a way of like how people make decisions about things. And I think it had to do with sort of the segregation model that we talked about in the agent-based modeling talk. And that's basically where, you look at your neighbor, and if they're similar to you, you stay, and if they're not similar to you, you move to a place where people are similar to you. And so this threshold model describes that process of thresholding. What's the threshold at which you make that decision? And so the ethnocentrism game is a little bit more complicated than that, but it's basically that. It's where you have different ethnic groups, and they have these set of criterion where you have, there's a sort of a reward for cooperating with people from different ethnic groups. There is also immigration. There's a death rate, a mutation rate. And then the question is, will people stay and cooperate, or will they move into their own groups? And so this simulation looks at that. If you run it, you have an initialization, and then you run it, and it's basically based on these parameters, how the simulation changes. So all these different colors are the different ethnic groups in different categories. And then they show, like by category, what, who's cooperating and who's not. And then there's a overall state of the simulation that you can look at the end, whether you see clumps or whether you see mosaic of things or whatever. That also gives you information about what the global state is in terms of agents cooperating, agents not cooperating, and so forth. And so that's one example of how you can run a simulation. And again, you can control all the parameters on this level of sliding this bar. And everything's set up underneath, so you don't even need to touch the code for this. You just run it by saying you set up empty or set up full. So it just either populates it with agents or it doesn't. And then you click go, and you can actually look at this simulation start to run, and based on these parameters, and then you get a graph here. And this again is another one that's included in the package, is Daisy World. So this is again a different simulation, different set of assumptions, a different set of parameters that you can change the values of over time. And this is the paper that this is based off of, Watson and Lovelock, Biological Homeostasis of the Global Environment. And so this is a famous simulation in ecology where the world is either filled with daisies of one color or daisies of another color, or it's uncovered. And it affects the way that the sun reflects off the Earth. So in early Earth's history, we had like microorganisms that the hypothesis is that microorganisms existed, and they created this they covered the Earth such that they changed the reflectance of the surface of the planet. The same thing with ice, when the Earth is mostly covered with ice, or the Earth is mostly covered with water versus land. And so you can try this with this daisy simulation, which basically changes the color of the planet, because the daisies will maybe cover the entire planet or maybe a little bit of the planet, and they affect the reflectance of sunlight off the surface and ultimately the temperature. And so you just run this as a series of agents. Do the agents proliferate? So these white agents, will they proliferate? If they do, then you have white daisies, a world of white daisies, and the reflectance changes. If the black daisies dominate, or they start to proliferate more than the white daisies and crowd those out, then the reflectance changes again, and you can see the graph here. And so you can see these different scenarios playing out as you change the parameter values. And again, you just set it up and you go. And so how do you export the data? So these data look interesting. I want to explore them. So to do that, you will go to this file drop down and go to export. And then you can export all plots. So you click that, and it provides you with a CSV file that will download onto your wherever you want to download it. And you open it up, and it's a CSV file, so it has the names of the variables and the values. So you can reproduce these graphs that are produced in the sidebar. But you can combine the variables and create other graphs as you see fit. So you can explore the data that way. But I talked before about sort of emergent, back in the turtles, termites, and traffic jam slide, about emergent behaviors. So you'll get emergent behaviors from the models I just showed you, but you can actually model something more explicit. And this is the Boyd simulation that I told you about. You can model flocking behaviors, which are directly a test of emergence. And they have this simulation called flocking V formations, and it's basically the same thing. So what you can do is you can make the number of birds variable, so you can make it a very crowded environment or a very sparse environment. You can change these things. The agents have a visual system, and so you can change the cone of vision, or where their vision is obstructed, the distance that they can see ahead of them, and then you can change their motion parameters. You can change the speed at which they travel, and when it gets too close, do they get away from their neighbor when they get too close or not. And so all those things can be modified, and then you can set the model up and run it, and it will, eventually you'll see these patterns form. These are emergent patterns, so you'll see things that look like bird flocks, large groups of birds that maybe turn in a very coordinated manner or form V shapes or things like that. And so it's very qualitative in terms of what you're seeing, but you're getting this, you're able to modify it by playing with these parameters. And finally, you can actually look at things in networks. So these are models of networks, not networks based on data, but they're networks based on pseudo data that's generated by the program. But you can test hypotheses about things like preferential attachment. So in complex network theory, we ask how do different nodes connect to one another to form a network. And one of the hypotheses, of course, is preferential attachment. And so in this simulation, you run it from an initial condition, and you can watch this network be built. And they generate this by generating some distributions underneath the hood. But you can see this degree distribution change as the network starts to form. And you can see that we've run it to 191 nodes here. And so the network is actually forming some really, tight clusters here at 191 nodes, as opposed to something like a random network. This is due to this preferential attachment, rule, which is just tells the node, if a node enters a network topology, connect to the most connected node. That's basically the rule, and it'll spontaneously form this from the rule. And so, what you can do is you can also download, I believe, this degree distribution information and use this to test against real networks. So if you want to generate a network that's just based on preferential attachment, you can look at its degree distribution over time, and you can compare it to some empirical network that you're observing. You can also simulate artificial neural networks. So this is, of course, a perceptron that you can train, and it's not trained on real data, it's trained on some pseudo data, and it's learning rules, and it's doing this over time. I thought I'd throw that in because people who are interested in NeuroMatch might be interested in this. But finally, we're getting to Ash is interested in the retina and in the eye, and so I was looking for models that might be suitable, and I couldn't really find anything But I did find this simulation, and it's really complicated. So this is an example of a model that you can build that's not included in the NetLogo library. And this is, of course, much more complex than this model back here, because you have a lot of different things going on. So we have a lot of, this is based on real data that they've published in this paper, Agent-Based Computational Model of Retinal Angiogenesis. And so the idea is that it's looking at the retina, but largely the blood vessels. And I don't really understand what's going on in the simulation. But, this simulation was actually is available for download from another library, SimTK. And so there's a library of biological simulations there that if you look this paper up and you look up SimTK, there's a link to it. You have to log in and get the model, download the model, and then you just upload it into NetLogo as a model, and it'll open it up and it'll run it. You just set up the initial condition and run it, and it's available. Now, this may not be suitable for what she wants to do, so I don't know if this is useful, but this is one example of something that can be made from real data and then just made like as its own simulation. You don't need to necessarily follow what's in the library. I think that's all I have in terms of like different simulations to show, but I just wanted to give people a taste of what's in NetLogo. So we have one message here. Okay, that was all the Telegram group. So that's all I have on this agent-based modeling.
Yeah, thank you for going through that.
Yeah. So I don't know if Ash has anything to say about it.
The paper which you said was kind of it is kind of deviated from what I thought, but I would like to read on it.
Okay.
And I just thought if I could have an idea about completely about the NetLogo thing, and then merging that with my actual idea, I think I can come up with some an abstract or something the next week.
Yeah.
About what I was trying to say.
Okay.
So this is basically retinal mapping as such. I think the one which you shared about the angiogenesis. But what I was trying was kind of different, which includes a part of retina, but it's basically visual field as such. I'll try to come up with some flow chart of idea or something, and I'll let you know about it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's like there probably isn't exactly the exactly right model that exists for what you want to look at. I mean, you could use like something like an existing model, and I was looking through the entire library. I didn't really see anything that might match that exactly. So it's like always tricky to find exactly the right model. But I think if you think you can map it to an agent-based paradigm, that might be a first step. And then we can figure out what to do after that. Exactly which model would be best for it. Yeah. Because I guess I didn't really cover it in I didn't. It's hard to do in a tutorial, but you can create like something that's very specialized for a certain question. So the ones that I showed you from the library are very general. People will use say Daisy World for a number of different things, but you can make something that looks at interactions between agents in a certain way, but it's it requires some programming. So it's always a trade-off.
I had a question about some of that in the sense of, so you said, NetLogo is sort of based in Java script.
Yeah.
you basically have to do everything you want to do within JavaScript.
Or Java.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Java, right? You can't really, like, there were some things that I was considering trying to bring over into it, but I guess I'm still in the stage of figuring out what I can do, in that sense. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can build off existing models, like, so they give you the code in the model, and basically it's not that complicated. It's just like it defines the variables and it defines the parameters, and like if you want to change the parameters, like I was thinking some of the game theory models, you have like those are very general that just say like if you pursue a certain strategy, here's the value, the payoff, and so you can just basically go in and change the payoffs in the code, and then run it, and it gives you a different structure of the model. But it's so I mean you can follow kind of the logic of the code, and maybe just it's a matter of finding different variable or values for things, but it's I don't know how much. I think there's some community support where people discuss how to make models from scratch. So I mean it's not like impossible to do, but it is a little bit of a barrier doing it in like it's basically Java. I'm not really even sure if it's classic Java because it's this platform was built like 15 years ago, so
right.
It's a little bit different from what you might encounter with a Colab notebook or something where it's pretty contemporary. Yeah, so I think that's good food for thought. I think people, if you're inspired by that, think about it. I'll put the slides up on Slack and the video up on YouTube, and then we can keep talking about it. So yeah. There's nothing else. I think we'll wrap it up for this week. Thank you everyone for attending. And I know Jesse probably won't be able to make it next week. So next week we'll probably hear from Sunidhi, and maybe I'll present something, and we can talk more about this.
Please put any questions in Slack, because we covered a lot of stuff here today, and I think it will be crystallizing more in the next 4 weeks on many of the different things we talked about. And I hope to be in Boston next weekend as part of meeting some colleagues, meeting some friends, and meeting some people at the summer school. So maybe I'll give an update on that at some point too. But hopefully that goes well. I don't know how this can actually happen. Yeah.
Well, congrats. Yeah. Glad you can make some connections, like even outside of the pandemic realm, like. Yeah. But
it's good to see everybody. Take care.
All right, everyone, have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.